This is the Billy Slater podcast, all thanks to Ram Trucks, eats everything else for breakfast, and Tab, we're on. Gamble responsibly. Hello, Billy.
Morning, Salty. That's right. We're down to 4, and this is the business end of the season. This time next week, we'll be down to 2, and 2 teams will be preparing for a grand final. So looking forward to 2 incredible preliminary finals this week, but I'm sure we'll dive into how these teams got there. We've got the Roosters and the Sharks getting up on the weekend, and they've pushed through to the preliminary final.
Absolutely. I've got to say, ahead of the preliminary finals this weekend, I think it's my favourite weekend of football. We all love a grand final, but sometimes these games, purely from a fan's point of view, they're just so good because so much is on the line.
And for a player as well, it's a really nervous game to get up for because you've got to put it all out there. And if you don't, you won't be playing in a grand final. But you know what's at stake, and you know what is next week. And it's a funny game because it feels like a grand final because of what's on offer. But at the same time, you know that there's another game behind it. So, preliminary finals, it's do or die. And 2 of these teams haven't faced do or die yet. We've got the Storm and the Panthers that have had such consistent seasons. They went through in great fashion in the first final, and now it's do or die for them as well.
All right, we'll talk about those games coming up this weekend in just a moment, but let's look back. First up, Saturday night at Allianz Stadium, and the first 20 seconds just so costly for the Sea Eagles, but the Roosters, very impressive.
Have you seen a start to a game like that before? I know we had the Origin a couple of years ago where we had 3 HIAs in the first 2 or 3 minutes, and that was dramatic. And I was front and center in that one, and trying to work out who goes where and how to manage your interchanges. But on the weekend, Tolu Kola off the kickoff got right in front of Jared Warrior-Hargraves, and he came off second best, and that was his night over. And then the very next tackle, Jake Trbojevic just copped the point of the shoulder from Lindsay Collins, and there was 2 down for Manly. So it was a dramatic start for the Manly Sea Eagles, and they just got caught on the back foot right at the start, and the Chooks were up for it.
Yeah, they certainly were. Look, you don't want to take anything away from Tolu Kola, keen to get down there, but sometimes just because you're fast and can get down there, Billy, leave it to the bigger boys?
It's an interesting topic, actually, and for a coach and for a playing group, because you have to have that mindset. You have to have the physical mindset to go after the game defensively, but at the same time, you've got to stay on the field. So those kickoffs are it's an environment where things can go wrong, and you've got to be clean, and you've got to be smart about your football. Not to say that these 2 incidences weren't. They were just unfortunate, but this is happening a lot off our kickoffs and early in the game where everyone's fresh and everyone's got energy. They're big collisions, and it's unfortunate for Manly because they lost Tolu Kola for the game as a position that you don't generally have a position on the bench to cover. So it was a tough one for him.
I just want to go back on something you mentioned a moment ago about how when you had to go through so much in Origin with those 3 HIAs in the first few minutes. You're very meticulous in your preparation. We know Anthony Seibold is as well. He plans for every scenario, or nearly every scenario. Is that one you just cannot plan for because what you faced a couple of years ago and what Seib's faced over the weekend? Yeah,
well, the first thing you've got contingency plans is around changing positions that you don't would usually swap. So like outside backs, key positions that usually play 80 minutes. They're guys you might have one interchange on the bench that could cover a position there. But then the other thing that you've got to think about is when you have 1 or possibly 2 guys go down with HIAs that fail those HIAs early in the match, you start with 8 interchanges. that straight away goes down to 6. Now, those 8 interchanges, you usually allocate those through fatigue, and you need all of them through fatigue, through the middle of the field. You've got to swap your middle guys. You might have to swap one edge player. So there, straight away, goes your 8 interchanges. If you go down to 6, you're relying on players to play longer minutes than you would have had planned for. So that throws a spanner in the works as well. But the first point of call needs to go to, okay, well, who jumps into the centres for Tolu Kola? Luckily, they had Ben Trebojevic on the bench who has played a little bit of centre. He's not a specialist centre, and defensively you can be caught out, but I thought he did a pretty good job considering he had to play the whole game in that position.
Let's talk about the Roosters and their fullback, James Tedesco. Milestone game for him, and well, everything he touched turned to gold on Saturday night. He was terrific.
Yeah, he was great. He went after the game. I spoke before the game about the 2 things that he has. He's got the quality. That's the passing game, creating opportunities, scoring tries. And then he's got the quantity as well. He is always in the game. He had 25 runs. He ran for over 200 metres. He's a wonderful player. But the whole team did that. The whole team turned up. And I don't think what happened at the start of the game for Manly would have made a difference if it didn't happen. If Tolu Kola stays on the field and Jake Trebojevic stays on the field, I don't think it would have mattered because the attitude and the intent that the Roosters turned up with, I don't think Manly could have combat that. They were just way too strong. They played way too fast, and the better team won. And James Tedesco was the best player on the field. And when you're the captain and you're the leader of that footy team, they've had some adversity over the last few weeks with a couple of key players going down. Well, Tedesco, he just stood up and said, well, I'll lead from the front. We're still in this competition, and let's go and chase it.
He's been absolutely tremendous, hasn't he, James Tedesco, for such a long time. Have you seen him play better? Billy, might be a tough one to answer there because he's been, as I said, terrific for well over a decade now.
That's the thing. The one thing that he has done, Salty, is he's been super consistent. He's been really consistent and played at a really high level for such a long period of time. And it was one of his better games, that's for sure, on the weekend. And he had a real mix to it. Like I said, he's always in the game because he takes all the tough carries. He's so hard to handle. He beats tackles and breaks tackles. But then he's developed over the last probably 5 or 6 years. He's developed this creativity in his game. The try that he ended up scoring down the left-hand side where he started on the inside of Luke Keary and then whipped to the outside, created the space for Tupou, who went down the sideline and then supported back on the inside and scored the try. Like that's a smart play, and I wouldn't be surprised if he called that play. Everyone did their role. Luke Keary did his role. Suaalii, he ran a really strong line, but James Tedesco, he disguised it really well, and he's brought that into his game where he can be the runner and be the worker within the middle of the field, but then he can get out on the edge when fatigue sets in, and he can get these plays on. I thought the first try to Victor Radley was enormous as well. He was on the left-hand side of the field. He whipped over to the right. He went straight and then bounced off his left foot and then picked up a straight-running Victor Radley who scored under the post. Like those things he's developed in his game over the evolution of his journey. But he's always had that quantity, that want to compete, always in the footy game, and I'm sure Trent Robinson would be really pleased with how his captain's playing.
Mentioned Trent Robinson. He spoke before the game, Billy, about a lot of outside noise saying shift Joey Manu into the halves for the game. He said, no, Joey's our centre and have full faith in Sandon Smith. And Sandon looked like he belonged, didn't he, on Saturday night?
Well, he scored his first NRL try in the semi-final, and it was a beauty too. He showed a whole heap of faith and a whole heap of confidence in Sandon Smith. I'm sure he would have had a conversation with him as soon as Sam Walker went down, and he would have said, Sandon, you're our halfback, mate. Let's go after this. No matter what happens, you're going to be our halfback for the rest of the year, and that's how it's going to be. And that would have given him confidence, and that's what he stuck to. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do things, and this is the way that Trent Robinson feels is best for his footy team, and he's still got Joey Manu in the centres, and Joey Manu played extremely well as well. He was in the top handful of players for the Roosters also, and really dangerous. They bring Joey Manu into the game in a unique way. Not many centres get into the game like Joey Manu does. He drifts across the field. Sometimes he'll even get the ball first receiver, drift across the field, and then pick up one of his key position players on the left-hand side. So they do bring Joey into the game like a half, in a sense. And I think Luke Keary really stood up as well and really supported his young halfback.
All right, we'll talk about their matchup with the Melbourne Storm this Friday night at Amy Park in a few moments' time, a little bit later on in the podcast. Let's go back to Friday night. And the Sharks, they broke their finals hoodoo. They were 0-7 in their last 7 finals matches heading into Friday night, but too good in the end for the Cowboys.
Well, they were too good in the first half for the Cowboys, and that's where the game was won and lost. And I'd like to say the game was over at half-time at 24-0 to the Sharks, but it wasn't. They had an opportunity in the second half, the Cowboys, to come back and win the game, but they just weren't quite good enough. The Sharks, you could see that they really did have a point to prove, and they wanted to get that monkey off their back and win a finals game for the first time since 2018, and they did that. And the pressure will be off a little bit. No one will give them a chance this week, but they were good in that first half. But I did see the wheels wobbling a little bit in that second half, and the Cowboys were coming. Val Holmes looked enormous. He looked really fast. Obviously, suffering that injury late in the game is a tough one for him. But there was a couple of opportunities with about 10 minutes to go. There was the one where Scott Drinkwater went through, and it was a last-ditch effort from William Kennedy to ankle tap him. That was a big play. And then around the same time, Reece Robson, he split the line, and there was many options around him, and they just couldn't quite execute that last play. I think there was a couple of tries that went begging with the scoreline. I think they were down by 8 points. It might have been 18-26, and the Cowboys could very well have won that game, even after that poor first half.
Braden Trindle's overall performance, he was brilliant in that first half. That he's had that had it in him. It's terrific, isn't it, to see this run that he's had this year in particular with that number 6 jersey, pretty much his own at the Sharks. Yeah,
he was fantastic. I think there was 2 star performances on the weekend: James Tedesco and Braden Trindle. All the talk has been about Nico Hines, and he's coming back from injury. He's the halfback. He's the star signing for the Sharks, but it was his halves partner, Braden Trindle. He was exceptional, and they scored 4 tries, the Sharks. He scored 2 of them, and he played a hand in the other 2. He was the leading half, and he helped Nico, get back to a bit of form and get that footy under his belt. And he was great. He kicked well, defended well. So no, he's in a wonderful spot at the moment. He's a crafty little player, and he was the best player on the field that night too.
One thing with the Sharks, Billy, they're back 3, and then you can throw in Kale Iro and Jesse Ramian as well, and Jesse will be better for the run from the weekend as well. But they just lay such a magnificent platform, don't they, for their forward pack when they're coming out of trouble. There was a couple of times on the weekend where, say, Toby Rudolph or Oregon Kafusi were taking their first hit up around the halfway line when they were coming out of trouble, such as the runs that Ronaldo Mulatalo and Sione Katoa give them. Yeah,
that's their strength, the Sharks, is that especially their wingers. Katoa and Mulatalo, they're not the biggest wingers, but they're very athletic and they can move really well. They can create space with their footwork, their speed, and then they're pretty strong in contact. And off the back of that, I think Kale Iro, he's having a great season. And with the footy, he's doing a great job. But without the footy defensively, he's becoming one of the elite centres in our competition. And Jesse Ramian, by all reports, he probably shouldn't have played that game with his ankle injury, but showed some toughness and courage to get out there and perform for his team. So he'll be better for the run as long as his ankle pulls up well. But again, at this time of the year, you need everyone to contribute. Sure, there's a few players that really shine, like your Trindles and Toby Rudolph. I thought he really stood out. Kale Idor. But everyone's got to do their job. If only 15 do their job, you're in a bit of trouble at this time of the year. You need 17 contributors and 17 players playing at a 7 or an 8 out of 10.
Cowboys, their season finished, of course, on Friday night. Your thoughts on their 2024 campaign?
Well, they finished in the top 8. I thought their last couple of weeks, they've had a lot of energy and a lot of purpose about their footy. They looked like they were really going after the competition, which is what you've got to do at this time of the year. And then I just think that they just weren't consistent enough through the year, and that showed in their last game. Their last game was very inconsistent. They looked brilliant at times. They looked like they were going to run over the top of the Sharks at different stages in that second half. But then the first half let them down, through errors and just through consistency of their footy. So, until they become a consistently hardened team, I just don't think you can do it at the end of the year when it counts. And that's what the best teams, look at the 2 top teams in our competition. They're consistent through the year. That's why they finish 1 and 2, and then they play consistent because they've built those habits throughout the year. They play consistent through the final series. So, they're going to take some beating, but the Cowboys, they need to learn how to do that.
You say about, how the top teams just, it's not just their top players in those top teams either. It's the whole top 30, isn't it, that are just able to do that job that the coach wants them to do.
Well, you only have to look back. It was about 3 or 4 weeks ago when the Melbourne Storm went to Townsville and they rested 11 of their star players. And the game went down to the wire. Melbourne were right in the game, right at the end of the game, and I think there was about 30 points scored by each team. So, to me, the Cowboys, they needed to make a statement then. And they did the following week because they would have been disappointed with that effort. But that's the consistency. It's not about who you're playing against. It's not about where you're playing. It's about delivering your best performance and your most consistent performance every week. And that's what the best teams do. It doesn't matter who's putting the jersey on. The best teams, Nathan Cleary's played, a third of the season? And they've still had an incredibly consistent year because they've got this foundation to their game that everyone is involved in, that everyone contributes to, and then Nathan puts the icing on the cake. He certainly makes them a better team, but they've got that system there and that foundation without him as well.
All right, we'll get on to, as we said, the grand final qualifiers, preliminary finals, a little bit later on in the podcast. The Brisbane Broncos look like they now have officially tied up the contract of Reece Walsh on a contract extension. And according to Neil Breen, of course, part of the Nine stable, the continuous call team in the footy show, a 4-year, $4.4 million deal that's expected to be officially announced by the Broncos anytime.
Yeah, it's great news for the Brisbane Broncos, and I think great news for Reece as well. So that's 4 years on top of next year. So he's already signed next year, and then he extends another 4 years on that. So it's 5 years from this point right now.
Yes,
I think it's a great result for the Broncos for one. Look, there's not many Reece Walshes running around in the game. There's not many players with that quality. And he wants to be a Bronco. I just think for the Broncos to have that, that's great. That's fantastic for them. And he wants to be in Brisbane. His family's in Brisbane. He's got his daughter that is up there, they're based up there. He's happy up there. That's where he wanted to go back to from the Warriors. And I think it's a great signing for the Broncos. It's a great signing for Reece because he's in his environment. he can really focus on his footy now. For the next 5 years, he doesn't have to think about contracts. He just has to think about, okay, now it's time to go after the next 5 years. He's played 75 games in the NRL. He's 22 years old, and the next 125 games are going to be with the Broncos. So that'll take him to a 200-game player. You ever think about where you get your game to from 75 games to 200 games? That's a great chunk of your career, and the Broncos are going to see the best of Reece Walsh in the next 5 years. And I work closely with him with the Queensland State of Origin team. He's a great young lad. He's got a great passion for the game. He loves the game, and he's got this drive to become better. So I think it's a good move by the Broncos, and all parties would be happy with the result.
Billy, I've heard from you, and I've heard from Matt Ballin, who works with you at Origin, and with Reece at the Broncos, and from Kevin Walters himself, that he'll come to the coaching staff and he'll have ideas about the opposition for next week, because he sits and watches all 8 games every week, and not just passively either. He's sitting there and thinking about the game.
Well, he loves the game. He loves the game. He's a student of the game, and he's got this drive within him. He works really hard. It just doesn't happen. When you see players with a lot of talent and super talent like Reece Walsh and Kalen Ponga and all these brilliant players, that it doesn't just happen. They've got to work for it, and they've got to. The game's too hard to just go out there and outlay your talent. You've got to be super fit. You've got to be professional. You've got to understand the game, and you've got to prepare for the game. So he does that, and he's just got this want to be as good as he can, and that's a great attribute. That want is a very undervalued attribute. If you don't have that want, it won't happen for you. It doesn't matter how much skill you've got, and luckily for the Broncos, like he's got that. He's 22 years old. He's not perfect, and sometimes we expect our young stars to be perfect too early, but he's only 22. Sometimes you got to take yourself back to when you were 22 and go, well, how many rough edges did I have? And I've still got rough edges. So he's going to develop. He's going to grow as a person, as a player, and we should be very thankful for players that love our game, like Reece Walsh, and that want to be a part of our game, because they bring everything to our game.
Yeah, certainly do. Now, some other news too. This also came from Neil Breen on the 2GB and 4BC continuous call team over the weekend, that Regan Campbell-Gillard, who is on the lookout for a 2 to 3 year deal, he's been linked now with the Gold Coast Titans. Experienced forward up for grabs, and while it looked like at one stage there he was linked with the Broncos or then the Dragons as well, that the Titans have now entered the discussion.
Breeny's got his finger on the pulse up in southeast Queensland, doesn't he?
He does.
He's got all the scoops. Look, he's a quality player, and did he pick up the Player of the Year at Parramatta? Didn't he?
I'm almost certain he did, yeah.
Yeah, like he's in some good form. He's a real aggressive front rower, and I think it'd be a handy pickup. Fresh start for him too. You see a lot of players with this sort of quality. He's played international football. He's played State of Origin football. I think he's still got plenty to offer, and some of those clubs that didn't play in the finals, like the Dragons and the Titans, I think they could really do with a Regan Campbell-Gillard. Could you imagine the Titans? Okay, so the Titans, you think about their key front rowers. You got Tino Fasua-Malaawi, who will come back next year off that knee reconstruction. Big Mo Fotuaika, who's elevated himself into a representative front rower. And then you add Regan Campbell-Gillard. I think they're that's a really strong forward pack, or leaders of a forward pack. And then you got some players in and around that. Is it Paulu? Paulu. Yeah. He was really impressive. A young front rower, built really close to the ground, but very thick set, and he sort of caught my eye this year as well. So you get a few of those younger guys in and around them. Dave Fafita, Beaufort, they've got a really strong forward pack building there. So if Regan Campbell-Gillard was a signing at the Titans, I think it would be a positive one.
Yeah, exactly. They are without Aaron Clark, who's moved on, along with Isaac Liu. Aaron Clark's gone to the Warriors, Isaac Liu to the Super League. So, there's probably space there. So we'll watch this space. Well done, Breeny. We've been waiting for you to produce, and in September he's got there. So good stuff from Neil Breen. Now, this is the Billy Slater podcast. It's thanks to Ram Trucks, Eats Everything Else for Breakfast, and Tab. We're on. Gamble responsibly.
Rugby league has had its fair share of iconic eras. But honestly, I can't get enough of the high-scoring, line-breaking, flick-passing, magic-rounding, origin drought-breaking, Vegas-flying, simply the best era of footy we're in right now. And with more stats, insights and markets than ever, it's the best time in sport, and Tab has the best app in sport. Tab, we're on. What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
On the Billy Slater podcast, it's now time for the Tab Eras debate. The time for sport is now, thanks to Tab. What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. And been talking about what was the best era for grand final rivalries. Oh, wow. And some of the greatest grand final rivalries. Well, Billy, you had your own at the Melbourne Storm grand final rivals.
Well, I was involved in 7 grand finals. I missed the 2016 grand final with a season-ending shoulder injury, so I was out of that one. But outside of that, 7 grand finals, and I think every grand final opposition becomes a rival because it's such a big game. Whether you win the game or you lose the game, there's always a rivalry off the back of playing against someone in a grand final. I think our biggest one was probably Manly, and that was because we played back-to-back grand finals through that mid-2000s. 2007 we won the grand final, and then 2008 they won convincingly against us as well, and then that culminated into a fierce rivalry for the next half a dozen years after that. Battle of Brookie was what was that, about 3 or 4 years after that 2008 grand final, and that just showed you how much these two teams went after each other. That showed you the rivalry between the two teams, and with that rivalry, everyone thinks hatred and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of respect with a rivalry, especially when it's grand final rivalry, because you've generally got the two best teams in the competition through that era going at it. So it's the two big alpha males sort of trying to beat their chests and want to be the dominant team in the game. And that was the case with the Manly Sea Eagles through that mid-2000 period, the late 2010s.
Is it spoken about if you've got the wood over someone in a grand final, got a victory over someone in a grand final, and you play them next year? Is there much chirp?
Occasionally, it does get brought up in the build-up, but it doesn't need to be, Salty. Like a lot of the big rivalries, you don't need to talk about it. It's just there, and it's just a feeling, and then it comes out in the game. The emotion comes out in the games. So you think about grand final rivalries, and back in the 80s, like 80s and 90s when I was growing up, I remember the Canberra Raiders and the Tigers. That was that the 89 grand final?
Yep.
Yeah, and that would have been a rivalry for years after that, and Manly and the Bulldogs, we still talk about that, and the passion that the supporters have for that. So the rivalry lives on for a long time.
It's funny, isn't it, Billy? You go back to that period of the early 90s, and one of the great club rivalries, because both teams just chock full of stars, was Canberra and Brisbane, but we were denied seeing them in a grand final. It was the grand final rivalry we never had, but they became good rivalries because of the quality of teams.
Yeah. And there would have been a lot of Queenslanders in the Canberra Raiders team as well. You had Gary Belcher, Mel Meninga, and even Wayne Bennett was down there for a period of time, and then he went to the Broncos. I know there's a rivalry between the Brisbane Broncos and the Melbourne Storm, purely because of the Queensland connection with Melbourne, but also Craig Bellamy went from an assistant coach at Brisbane to the Melbourne Storm as the head coach. So, again, it's not one that's spoken about in the meeting rooms all the time and built up like that, but it's just there. It just finds itself there because it's real.
At the moment, if we do get the Melbourne-Penrith grand final, that would be the second time in 4 years or 5 years that the two teams have played off in a grand final. Over the last 20 years, you've had some rivalries in grand finals, the Roosters as well. But now, Melbourne and Penrith, I know that the Panthers losing players, but if they continue to remain up there and over the next few years playing off in other deciders, that's a known modern day rivalry.
Well, the Panthers are starting to create a fair list of rivals in the last 4 years. They've been in the last 4 grand finals. So, if what we were saying is correct, they're certainly the hunted. What was it? 2020.
2020,
that grand final, and that was the last time the Panthers were beaten in the premiership. They've won the next 3, and if it is the Storm and Panthers, that would be a huge motivation for the Panthers to go out and take out the premiership again. I'm sure they've got motivation anyway. It does point in that direction, doesn't it? Like Melbourne and Panthers, they look the two dominant teams of the competition. They've had the 2-week preparation into this preliminary final, and we all know the advantage that surrounds that. But they've still got to go and get it done, don't they? They've still got to go out there and perform this weekend to get themselves into that grand final.
Absolutely. There haven't been too many other grand final rivalries or multiple ones for Penrith, because every time they've beaten someone in a grand final, they failed to make the finals the next year. South, Parramatta and Brisbane, of course. All right, that's the Tab Eras debate on the Billy Slater podcast. It's now time for the Billy M's. You don't have much to choose from now, but I'll tell you what, it's quality over quantity at this stage of the year. Your most impressive team of week 2 of the finals.
Yeah, that's the easy one. I thought the Roosters. The first week of the finals, they played the Panthers, the Roosters, and no one holds the mirror up to yourself like the Panthers do. They identify all the deficiencies in your game, and they hold the mirror up to you, and they say, this is exactly where you're at in this competition. And that's what they did in the week 1 of the finals, and they spun it around, the Roosters. They looked at themselves. They worked hard. By all reports, they had a really tough and physical week at training, and they took that into the game. They were brilliant. They played fast. They played physical. Their skill was at an elite level, and they kicked well. I thought Luke Keary did a great job kicking and turning the ball over in good field positions. They were the best team on the weekend for sure.
Most impressive player, touched on this earlier. You already said there were 2 standouts over the weekend.
Yep, 2 contenders, James Tedesco and Braden Trindle. I'm going to go to Braden Trindle. I just think he stood up when his team needed him. He was the dominant half in the game, and you think of all the scoring plays, he scored 2 and he set up the other 2. I think he was great, and if he's not on the field, the Cowboys probably win the game.
Well done to the Caboolture Snakes Junior, Braden Trindle, who's having a great time of it at the Sharks. This is the Billy Slater podcast for Ram Trucks. Eats everything else for breakfast, and Tab. We're on. Gamble responsibly. Billy, I've got some listener questions. Here we go.
Okay.
This one is from Jack. Billy, how do you think Josh Schuster will go under Wayne Bennett at the Bunnies next year, and do you believe that 5'8" is his best position?
That's a good question. I don't think the Bunnies will fix Josh Schuster. I don't think Wayne Bennett will fix Josh Schuster. Josh Schuster can fix himself. That's the only way that he is going to reignite his journey in the NRL is his own attitude and his own performance. And that's not performance on the weekends. That's performance every day. It is a professional environment, our game, and it's been well documented that it's been his professionalism away from game day that has found himself in this position. We know the quality of player he is, and I don't care what number's on his back. If he applies himself, he can make any number on his back work. Whether it's 5'8", whether it's lock forward, whether it's back row, he's got enough talent and he's got the size and the athleticism. He's a great player. But if he rolls into Redfern and he thinks Wayne Bennett's going to fix him, it's not going to work. It's got to be him.
All right, good on you, Jack. Thank you very much for that question. Before we have a look back at the final round of NRLW, one of your former teams has already won a premiership. Billy, well done to Dave Elliott, the coach, and all the players at the North Devils in winning the Host Plus Cup at Dolphin Oval on Sunday evening. Great to see. And Tessie New, who's without a home for next year, got the Duncan Hall medal for player of the match. So nice spot to put your hand up if you want a contract, perform in a grand final.
The Mighty Devils. So they go down to grand final day, do they now?
They do,
So they'll play the winner in the New South Wales Cup?
Yep.
Wow.
That's between the Jets and North. So it could be North v North for the National Championship.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, so well done. Actually, there's another one of your former clubs. One
go.
game for the Bears?
One game for the Bears. I don't know how many I played for the Devils. In the Queensland Cup, I think I made about 20 games maybe all up.
There you go.
Probably not even that, maybe 15.
All right, well, we're down to in the NRLW. And, oh, by the way, before we get to that, and none of them at fullback. All in the centres or wing, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure the first game of fullback I played was my debut in the NRL.
There you go.
I don't think Craig Bellamy knew that. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been there. Luckily, he didn't.
Good stuff. All right, round 9 of the NRLW has come and gone. The final round of the regular season. Tigers defeated the Sharks. The Broncos too strong for the Dragons. The Knights over the Cowboys. Raiders defeated the Titans and the Roosters beat the Eels. Brisbane finished as minor premiers. They'll take on 4th place Sharks this Sunday. That's at 2 o'clock at Totally Workwear Stadium, Langlands Park in Coorparoo in Brisbane. And the Roosters against the Knights at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon at Allianz Stadium. Both games live and free on 9 and 9 now. So we're into the semis of NRLW, Billy.
Semis of NRLW, and the winners of both these games go through to the grand final. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go the Broncos. I think the Broncos can beat the Sharks. I think the Broncos can win the competition, actually. I think they've got a lot of strike. And then the Roosters and Knights. Isn't that a rivalry? Millie Elliott's 2 teams. She's playing for the Roosters now, won a competition at the Knights. I think we've got the best 4 teams left in the competition.
Absolutely, yeah. Looking forward to those semi-finals on Sunday. As I said, both games live and free on 9 from 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Now, NRL Grand Final qualifiers. Billy, I cannot wait for both of these games, especially Friday night at Amy Park. Looking forward to heading down and joining you in Melbourne for this one. Billy, Panthers v Sharks should be Storm v Roosters on Friday night should be a beauty.
Yeah, look, obviously I'm going for the Storm. I think the Storm can win the game, but it's not without the possibility of the Roosters making the grand final. The Roosters, the way that they played on the weekend, have enough danger in their footy team that if they get it right and Melbourne don't quite get it right, the game could certainly go to the Roosters. And it's going to be a quality game. I don't think it's as lopsided as the other one. I think the Roosters have got so much firepower that they can go down, and with the physicality that they played with against Manly, you got Jared, you've got Spencer Leniu, Lindsay Collins, and they've got these young forwards that are coming through, White and the likes, Tupanua on the edge. I just think they're a dangerous footy team that, James Tedesco is in that sort of mood again. Luke Keary, organises everything and is the conductor again. I think they've got enough danger in their footy team to challenge Melbourne, but Melbourne, week off, key positions, that's where it's lent towards them. So if they get the basics right and they get the foundation of their footy right, I think they'll have too much class in their key positions, but it's going to be an incredible game at Amy Park.
Yeah, cannot wait for it. Of course, for those in Victoria, the only Victorian left in any of the major codes, Victorian team in any of the major codes, the Melbourne Storm. So get behind your team, and I'm sure we would anyway, but sell out Amy Park on Friday night.
You'd imagine.
Yeah, you'd think so. Then Saturday night, it is Penrith v Sharks. So you're with the Panthers here?
I am. I think, Panthers too strong. Panthers, like I said before, they hold the mirror up to you better than any other team. And I just think that they will dominate field position. I think they play that power game where they just turn the ball over in the corner, and the Sharks will find it really hard to get out of their own end. If the Sharks can strike early, I think the Sharks, the only way that they give them a chance is if they go all in and go after their attack. Just throw caution to the wind, attack from the middle of the field, because you may not get many opportunities up in the good ball area. Attack from the middle of the field and go after your footy. I think that's the chance for the Sharks. And if they can get on the scoreboard and they can apply that scoreboard pressure to the Panthers, then they can put them in an uncomfortable situation. But if you want to go set for set with the Panthers and it's not your strength, then you're going to come off second best. So I think Panthers win this purely because of the foundation of their footy.
Either way, it's going to be a terrific weekend of football. Grand final qualifiers, preliminary final weekend. Bring it on. Billy, look forward to seeing you in Melbourne on Friday night.
Can't wait. Thanks, Salty.
Yeah, bring it on. This has been the Billy Slater podcast. All thanks to Ram Trucks, eats everything else for breakfast, and Tab, we're on. Gamble responsibly. Grand final edition next week. Billy will be with you from Monday.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
This year, NRL on 9 is your one-stop shop for all footy.
That's right, Freddie. Not about the highlights. Action, 7 days a week.
Billy and Gus podcast, get that on your drive on the way home. Immortal Behaviour, grab a seat on the couch for that. And of course, my favourite, Freddie in the Own.
The best footy brains, the biggest games.
Don't trust the algorithm, subscribe to NRL on 9 and get all your entertainment there.